Are you struggling to come up with original content week in and week out? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients, let them talk about what they care about most, and never run out of content ideas again. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show. Welcome back to B2B Growth. I'm Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. Today, I'm joined by Kathleen Booth. She is the VP of Marketing over at Attila Security. She's also a fellow podcaster. She is the host of the Inbound Success podcast. Kathleen, welcome to the show. How's it going today?
Great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. I saw your post the other day on LinkedIn about ungated content, and I've been known to kind of rant on this topic as I'm talking podcasting and marketing here on this show, as well as with other marketers offline. And I thought, man, this would make a great conversation for listeners. So I'm excited for you to share your thoughts and some practical applications with listeners today. Before we get into that, though, a little bit of background on yourself and what you and the Attila Security team are up to these days.
Sure. So, as you said, Kathleen Booth, I am the head of marketing at Attila Security. We are a venture-backed cybersecurity company that helps organizations secure their communications. And we do it in a variety of ways. I'm relatively new to the company. It's exciting. I love the field of cybersecurity. And, what makes me passionate is coming into a company like this that's still a relatively young company, putting together a team, developing a marketing strategy, and really helping the company grow. So,
absolutely. Awesome.
Yeah.
Exciting stuff. Yeah, for sure. So this topic is one that I think a lot of marketers can get fairly passionate about. I think it's worth backing up before we start to say, well, you shouldn't gate your content, or you should gate it all, or here's when you should. We should do a little bit of setting the scenario on, let's back up and talk about the role of gated content. I don't think it's anything brand new to listeners of this show, but how you think about it in, the role of gated content and how we got to where we are today, Kathleen.
Absolutely. And I know that your listeners are pretty savvy. So, if you're listening, we all know that the purpose of gated content in the marketing mix is really to convert those visitors or that cold audience into a known lead that you can then nurture and hopefully pull down the marketing and sales funnel. So, typically gated content is used once somebody has found you and they're interested enough that they're willing to trade their personal information in exchange for something of value. It's pretty basic, but I think it's important to just sort of set that stage as we talk about this topic, because I think a lot of marketers really get gated content wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about that. Where, in your opinion, has the use of gated content kind of led us today? What do you see is working well about it? And where do you see we're maybe misapplying it, or it's led us to some bad things, either for our own effectiveness or for our future customers' experience?
Yeah, there's so much here. I'm going to have to figure out how to make it to bundle it into a nice little package. But I think the overriding thing that occurs to me really is that marketers have, as we tend to do, have abused the ability to gate things. In the last decade, as marketing automation platforms and content management systems have gotten more sophisticated, it's become so easy for marketers to stand up a landing page, put a form there, and put some content behind a gate. So easy, in fact, that I think in a lot of cases, what people are gating is not great content, to be candid, and as a person who travels the internet, I mean, we all are those people, right? We're both marketers, but we're also human beings that use the internet. As a human being that travels the internet, you know this, you go to a lot of websites, you're constantly presented with conversion opportunities. And I can't speak for anybody else, but I know that for myself, probably 8 out of 10 times is what I get after I convert is garbage. It's not worth my having traded my personal information in exchange for it. And what happens when that starts becoming commonplace is it makes the visitor less likely to decide to do that, to trade their personal information in exchange for content, especially if you haven't given them any reason to believe that what they're going to get is good. If you don't have any sort of other content in your website that really proves that you're going to deliver high value content, nobody is going to convert anymore. I mean, maybe somebody will, but your conversion rates aren't going to be high. And I've seen this bear out. I've worked in a lot of different companies. I was in the agency world for a long time. So, as somebody in the agency world, you get insights into a lot of different companies' marketing. And I have watched conversion rates decline consistently for years now. So this is a real thing. It's backed by data. Less people are converting. And that's because what they're finding once they convert is garbage. So that's really the top error. But the second mistake that I really see marketers make is they shoot themselves in their own foot by gating things that shouldn't be gated. And what I mean by that, and look, I mean, we're all guilty of it. When I came into the company I'm in now, this company was doing that. And it's something that I'm in the process of fixing. So in our case, our customer case studies were gated. And to me, that's absolutely crazy. The point of gating something is to get somebody to turn into a lead that you can nurture. But the point of a case study is to help convince somebody who's already a lead that they should buy from you. It's not generally something that you use to convert a visitor into a lead, unless it's super, super detailed or includes, some sort of highly proprietary information. I mean, I'm trying to imagine a circumstance where I would gate a case study or a success story. But look, at the heart of it, case studies and success stories help you sell. So why would you make it harder and less likely for somebody to get information that is going to help you sell to them by putting it behind a gate?
Yeah.
Do not do that. So those are the two biggest mistakes I see people make.
Yeah. So one, not having content that's valuable enough to show that, hey, if I provide my personal information, I'm going to get even better, more valuable content behind a gate. And then, applying gates to things that shouldn't be gated. I mean, I'd imagine just the sales team being up in arms. Like, what do you mean these case studies aren't just, freely accessible? Because it's just not being thought through in the right way of where is this? Is this in the decision phase, or is this, where we're just sharing information up at the consideration phase? Something you mentioned there about declining conversion rates made me think too, Kathleen, that we've also got to account for declining conversion rates, but also a higher and higher percentage of those conversions also being garbage. You talked about the content on the other side being garbage, but the John ABC, the Susie123@gmail.com, right? Like everybody's got throwaway emails. Have you looked at any data, or, what are your thoughts on that and kind of that trend? Or is that just, something that we've got to come to expect as a certain percentage of our signups and conversions?
It's so funny because I was right before you asked me that, I was going to say, I just remembered this other thing I should have said, which is exactly what you pointed out. And that is that, the whole point of gating content is to get quality, qualified leads that you can nurture. But because nobody trusts that they're going to get anything of value behind a gate, and people do not want to speak to your salespeople generally until they're very far along, they give you these garbage email addresses. And I joke about it, but it's not really a joke. Like, I have genuinely gotten people filling out forms and leaving email addresses like leavemealone@stop.com. There's no clearer signal that this person does not want to be contacted. That is not a good lead. So you don't want that lead. They actively do not want you getting in touch. It's a problem. And that's what happens when people don't see value, but convert anyway on a lark, thinking maybe I'll get something good. We'll see. What some marketers have done to combat that is ungating content. Other marketers who are determined to still gate their content have tried to address that by discontinuing placement of the offer on a thank you page and instead requiring, for example, a work email and then emailing the offer to somebody, which, it introduces another level of friction. I get why they do it, but why frustrate your visitors? There's a lot of problems surrounding that whole issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's several things you're touching on there that I've seen. I've seen, some folks go as far as gating their podcast content, which, my response is, oh my goodness, what are you doing? Like
Right.
podcasts are obviously brand awareness, thought leadership at the very top of the funnel. And part of the reason that podcasts are growing in popularity is one, we can consume them passively, and they just fit our busy lives, but also people are tired of gated content. And so if they can just be a fly on the wall, see what you deliver for a while, and then potentially, make that conversion later down the road, they like that safety and security. And so when you take that away, you're just kind of fighting against the natural flow of things. The other thing that I hear you saying that I see a lot in what we're doing as marketers is every conversion leads to the same action, right? Whether they download the case study or, the guide, or no matter where it is in the funnel, it means it goes to an SDR and they get 3 calls and they get, this nurture campaign. And so there's also some nuance, like let's be let's not jump right to it, right? So I think that is worth talking about as well. You mentioned something as we were chatting offline, Kathleen, that I wanted to have you share with listeners, and that is how you picture it in what if we didn't gate our content? What if we took 90% of it and just took off all the gates? Then what would that look like? And it sounds like, you're in the process of doing that. You've gone through that process in other positions. What are your thoughts? Because I imagine, people listening to this, they're immediately thinking, oh, I'm afraid of this and this is going to go down and this bad thing. What can you say from your own experience of what that might look like for other folks listening to this?
Yeah, I think it's kind of fun as a marketer to imagine making really audacious changes. And maybe this is audacious and maybe it's not. But I love asking myself that question of what would happen if we just removed all of the gates, all of the forms, and gave everything away. And in many respects, I think that is the most pure form of inbound marketing. Because really what inbound is a mindset or a philosophy that by helping other people and by educating them and solving their problems, naturally we will realize ROI. And it's very much a pay it forward mentality. So when you introduce that quid pro quo of the form early on, it sort of pollutes that pure form of inbound a little bit. And so I did start to test this out. It was years back when I had my own agency. There were the era of ebooks, as I like to call it, when everybody had ebooks, and ebooks were the first things I think that really became garbage. The number of low quality, terrible ebooks proliferated considerably. And I remember at the time thinking, nobody's going to continue to download our ebooks because everybody thinks ebooks are trash. So let's take these ebooks that we put a lot of work into. I mean, I thought there was still really good content in them, but not a lot of people were seeing that content because it was in a PDF on a thank you page that wasn't crawlable behind a form. So at the time, this was when I owned my own agency, I said to my team, let's take these ebooks, let's put the content of them right on one of our website pages and just give the entire ebook away. Now, if somebody wants to save a PDF of this or print it out, we can have a little field at the top that just says, like, enter your email if you'd like to receive a PDF by email or something along those lines. So nobody had to do it to get the content. They could certainly print out the pages on the website. There was no requirement. What was fascinating to me was our conversions actually went up. And the reason that happened, or at least my theory about why that happened, is that people consumed all the content. They saw that it was valuable. So then they had no problem giving us their email address because they thought, this is really good content and I want it and it's worth it. And oh, by the way, maybe they'll send me more really good content because, odds are there's more where this came from. So that was a really valuable exercise, but it also had the side benefit of really helping our SEO. So when you go from having very long form, super valuable content in an uncrawlable PDF to publishing it right on your website page, that's incredibly keyword rich content and copy that all of a sudden search engines can see, and you get all of those benefits. So it's sort of like the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, absolutely. Isn't it? It's so funny. We're big fans of Gary Vee, and especially in the way that he talks about this value first mentality that when you give and you give and you give, So one of the things I heard him say recently, he talks about giving as jab, jab, jab before you give the right hook. And he's like, the people that really get it, they just jab more and they never throw the right hook, but they're still winning. And I see that in what played out there in the way that you're talking about it, because when we give more comes back to us. Tell me a little bit about some of your advice, Kathleen, for how marketers, if they are, maybe brave enough, maybe that's not the right word to say, I'm adding a little bit of flair to it, but how they could leverage ungated content. You mentioned, a specific way there to just put it out there in a blog post and then give people an option once they've seen the value to potentially convert instead of putting that conversion before they determine if they get value. Any other piece of advice for folks that are deciding to test the waters there or make a radical shift, as you put it earlier?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is really to take a step back and look at the big picture of your marketing. Marketing, when you think about funnels and you think about conversion rates, you have to really look at traffic, leads, and sales. Mm-hmm. And the first question I would ask myself is, do I have substantial enough traffic? Because what I often see happen is companies that have low traffic and lots of gated offers, and it's kind of pointless because you have all these fantastic offers, but there's it's the tree that fell in the forest and no one was there, right?
Right.
Like if that's your situation, ungate things, get that SEO benefit, get people coming to your website, and at least, get the traffic engine going. Then you can think about like maybe putting some things behind a gate. That's number one. So really look at your traffic first. And then look at how your gated offers are performing. If your conversion rates are low, ungate it because nobody's seeing it anyway. It's not serving a purpose for you as long as it's good content, right? Or ungate a good portion of it. That's, the second thing I think. And then really look at the quality of the content. If it's great content, very often you can get more benefit by ungating it because you make it more shareable, especially things like research that has visuals and charts and graphs that can go really viral if people have access to it. But if you put it behind a gate, it makes it much harder for people to share, which means that more people won't find it. So, those are reasons to ungate. And if you do decide to ungate, I do think it's worth giving people an option to get it by email. I think especially these days with people being so mobile and browsing on their phones and their tablets when they're on the go, oftentimes they might not have enough time to read an entire piece of content. They may see it and think, ooh, this is great. I want to share it for later. So it's really nice if you can give people an option to have that, link show up in their inbox or a PDF show up in their inbox so that when they're back at their desk in a position to read it and consume it and or share it with colleagues, they're able to do it more easily. And I think if you do that, you will still see conversions, but you'll also get the benefit of that traffic bump that comes at the top of the funnel.
Yep. Absolutely. I mean, two things there. Just, a side note for listeners. One of the things I've done, because I find myself exactly that scenario you just talked about, Kathleen. Oh, this is really good, but I don't have time to consume this right now. I use a tool that is both a mobile app and a Chrome extension called Pocket. You can get it at getpocket.com, and it allows you to bookmark stuff and then kind of tag it. So if it's something sales related or marketing or, something related to podcasting, I can tag it and go there, and then I can come back to it. So anyway, just a thought there. If anybody else is in the same boat as me sometimes as they're browsing around and consuming content themselves. The other piece that I think is really interesting is, like you said, ungating the content, but then giving them an option to get it via email. And what I would suggest for folks, both as a marketer and a consumer of content myself, is that, we put so much time into these highly designed PDFs that really are so hard to consume on mobile. Yeah. It just drives me nuts. And I've had great content in front of me from a brand I know delivers great content, but because I'm pinching and zooming around the PDF, I'm like, I just don't have time for this.
It's so frustrating.
And so I think giving people an option to just go back to that blog post maybe, or go to, a mobile ready version of it, or just make your PDFs one column, big font, assuming that people are going to see them on a mobile device, because we all know it's over half of people that are consuming them there now.
Today's growth story revolves around search engine marketing. Delphix, a big data platform, had hired an agency to manage their Google ads a few years ago, but they weren't seeing the results they wanted to see. Being such a technical B2B solution, they set out to find a team that could take on their challenge. After countless proposals, they found the perfect fit: Directive Consulting, the B2B search marketing agency. In just 1 week after launching Directive's campaigns, Delphix saw their lead volume double and their cost per lead drop by 60%. I have a hunch that Directive can get these kind of results for you too. So head over to directiveconsulting.com and request a totally free custom proposal. That's directiveconsulting.com. All right, let's get back to this interview.
Let's round it out, Kathleen, with maybe some reasons why you still would want to gate content to maybe balance out the conversation here. Because I think, we've given a lot of reasons, a lot of, philosophical as well as tactical and applicable reasons to ungate content. As you think about it, what are kind of the criteria in your mind today on this is the type of content I would gate, or these are the things that I put through the test to see maybe I am going to gate this content in my current strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the first reason, which is probably the most obvious, is when content is the product. And what I mean by that is there are plenty of organizations that produce content and either charge for it or it's, limited to their customers only as a value add. A great example of this one that I'm a big fan of is a company called CB Insights. It's an analyst firm, and they have a phenomenal email newsletter, first of all, which you should follow if you don't, but they have really great original research. And what they do that's very smart, I think, is they'll kind of tease some of what's in the content. And then they, if you want to really see the details, you have to opt in as either a customer or a subscriber and part of their program, et cetera. So for some companies, their original data, their content is part of the product they're delivering. And that absolutely makes sense to continue to gate. I think the second time when you might consider continuing to gate it potentially is if it's really performing well and is already gated. If you don't have any issues with traffic, if your conversion rates are extremely high, if the content is generating really good leads, well, then certainly don't, ruin that and take the gate off. I mean, you could still test it and see what happens, but I'm not advocating, eliminating all gates if you have situations where they're performing really, really well. And I think you just have to look at your conversion rates and see what's going on there to make that decision. And then I think the other opportunity is if you want to repurpose content that's already ungated. So a lot of marketers will produce what I would call topic cluster content, where they're writing a lot of different articles around a theme. Some marketers get super smart and they actually will write a series of blog posts that are intended to be like the chapters in a book, for example. If you're going to roll that all up and create that ultimate book, that could be a great use case for putting a gate out there because all that content is already available. So you're not going to necessarily get the SEO benefits. That it's already living on your site, but it does give you a way for somebody who wants to have all the content in one nice little package to enable them to get it. So those are probably the three big use cases when I personally really like to gate content.
Yeah, I love that third one. And we've seen, other brands that we work with and on their podcast do that really, really well. Terminus and their Flip My Funnel show is now 500 plus episodes. And we've helped them look at, okay, what are some of the common themes where all the authors you've interviewed or, female leaders or CEOs, and that can create a lot, whether it's a podcast or a blog series or a webinar series or whatever, doing some of that roundup content where you package it nicely and you bring together, a series or a common thread into something that makes sense to gate. I think that's a really good addition to the conversation there, Kathleen. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. I feel like we could go on and on about gated content and all things marketing. I love having experienced marketers on the show like yourself. For now, in the interest of time, we'll sign off, and I would love for you to share with listeners where they can stay connected with you if they're like me and have found a lot of value in this conversation, where they can find your podcast, the Inbound Success Podcast. What's the best way to reach out or stay connected with you, Kathleen?
Absolutely. So personally, I'm very active on LinkedIn, and anybody is welcome to send me a connection request, and I would love to connect with you there and happy to answer any questions. If you're interested in learning more about Attila Security, where we can be found at attilasec.com. And the podcast, which is called the Inbound Success Podcast, is actually published by Impact Branding and Design. So you'll find that at impactbnd.com.
Awesome. Kathleen, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Hey there, this is James Carberry, founder of Sweetfish Media and one of the co-hosts of this show. For the last year and a half, I've been working on my very first book. In the book, I share the 3-part framework we've used as the foundation for our growth here at Sweetfish. Now, there are lots of companies that have raised a bunch of money and have grown insanely fast, and we've featured a lot of them here on the show. We've decided to bootstrap our business, which usually equates to pretty slow growth. But using the strategy outlined in the book, we're on pace to be one of Inc.'s fastest growing companies in 2020. The book is called Content-Based Networking: How to Instantly Connect with Anyone You Want to Know. If you're a fan of audiobooks like me, you can find the book on Audible, or if you like physical books, you can also find it on Amazon. Just search Content-Based Networking or James Carbary, Carbary, in Audible or Amazon, and it should pop right up.